This is the Movie Theater Butter Podcast, where we talk about stories made into movies and what was modified for the big screen. As a warning, this episode will discuss the plot of both the movie and its original source material, so be ready for spoilers. I'm your host, Kim Labick, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, so I can't think of any other way to start us out than to say, monkey see, monkey do. Dev Patel, you goddamn genius, you. That's right. Today's film for discussion is none other than Monkey Man. Thank you so much. I really sat there for a good 30 to 45 seconds trying to think of something, and that's all I could do. So,
I mean, honestly, I was anticipating you saying minutes, so I feel like that speaks to your creative genius. 30 seconds, no problem.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm a good procrastinator. That's where I get my golden material from. All right, so as always, we will start off with a favorite quote. Elise, you have your name is Elise. Hold up, I missed something important here.
Hello.
Today, I am joined by an old friend of mine, established editor and woman of many other creative talents, Elise Conklin. Elise, how are you?
Thank you. I am doing pretty well. I did mention to you, I recently had just the most insane, D&D reveal of a 111 session campaign. So I am reeling and definitely 100% focus on Monkey Man.
Yeah, totally. I hope. Monkeys are an animal. In D&D, there are animals. I don't know why that's necessary to mention.
No, there's a connection there.
There's a connection there. Yeah, if I think long and hard enough, 30 to 45 seconds, I can come up with a good segue. But anyways, let's officially start off with a favorite quote. Elise, do you have a favorite quote from the movie?
You know, I am when you asked for a favorite quote, I was like, well, this is an action movie. There's honestly not a lot of dialogue in this, but when I started pulling through the quotes, there were genuinely a lot of standouts. I think the one that I settled on, it was when he was talking to Alpha, the Niraj leader. She talked about voices in his head or being haunted by voices. And he says, just one, her scream. It's been inside me my whole life. And that just feels that just really, I remember watching it and just going, oh, ooh, physically, verbally reacting to it. But I mean, genuinely, there were a lot. My runner up was when Alfonso said, welcome to heaven. And then it's just the sleaziest strip club you've ever seen. And that just felt so perfect for the world and the people who are attracted to this VIP room. Welcome to heaven, baby. It's just the nastiest, most male ego you've ever seen.
Yeah, that coupled with his Nicki Minaj comment about the little car. I was like, I know exactly who this character is, but very well done.
He was very easy to understand.
100%. All right. My favorite quote is going to be super lame because I found it last minute. And it's, I guess it's not super lame. You know what? It's decent. It is the bad guy whose name I'm forgetting, but the political figure says at one point, thank you. Okay, Elise. Somebody did their homework and I did not. Hell yeah. See, that's why I invited you on here. I was like, you need to fill in the blanks of my lack of knowledge.
I will happily fill in the blanks anytime.
Perfect. So he has a line where he says, anger will not quiet your soul, my son. And it was one of those things where it's obviously in the context of the film. Yeah, it was in the context of that film and that character. And obviously he's clearly the bad guy. He's clearly a piece of shit. And he says, anger will not quiet your soul, my son. Which, out of context, a beautiful quote and a really, I think it's one that could speak to everybody. It's the kind of thing you would stick in your room as one of the little poster quotes kind of thing.
I mean, I think Baba Shakti, he was a very charismatic character.
Yeah,
he was beloved by many people. So I think him having these quotes where you're okay, I agree with you, but follow your own advice, my man.
Literally, yeah. But it's that's so it's perfect because it's this film and a lot of what it's saying, especially through this character, is about modern politics. And we don't have to dive into, especially if you don't want to express any formal opinions on world politics. But I think many of us, regardless of where we land on the political spectrum, can agree that in this particular time, so many politicians are speaking incredibly hypocritically. And they kind of always have, but it's so obvious now. And, they will say something like, anger will not quiet your soul, my son. And then literally give like weapons and money for weapons to kill and destroy and torture people,
Yeah,
kind of
proceed
thing.
to do the most infuriating shit possible and saying like anger will not quiet your soul, my son. Then stop doing stuff that's making me so angry. Like stop
Yeah.
abusing these ridiculous systems of power, this vast class differential. I thought that there were a lot of things that were very clever. I mean, truly, my favorite kind of movie is a thought-provoking action film, and Monkey Man feels like it really fits into that category. I would put it up like Everything Everywhere All at Once and Mad Max Fury Road. Those are probably my favorite films of all time, and Monkey Man fits really well within those two, where it's there's a lot of fighting and violence, but there's so much in between those moments, and it makes the violence, it makes the fighting, that's worth fighting for. Violence is not all the answer almost all the time, but when it's time to defend your civil liberties, your like right to live and exist in the world, sometimes violence feels really appealing. I also think, going off of the quote that you just had about like anger will not quiet your soul, he's fighting for revenge and anger through the first half, and he doesn't start to win until he starts to fight for people who are still here. So I think that him saying like, oh, anger will not quiet your soul, he's not angry anymore. He's fighting for so much more than just his anger. So it's kind of like, too little, too late, Baba. I'm not here to listen to you. Absolutely not.
Too little, too late, Baba. Damn right, man. Well said. We're going to cut this out. No product placement for Arizona iced tea, but I am in a dry environment right now, so I'm a thirsty one.
Fun.
Not in that way. Anyway. So, I mean, speaking of being thirsty, Dev Patel, well done.
Oh my
well
God.
done. I think everyone's kind of a big
man.
fan of, I mean, a beautiful human being, an incredibly talented person as an actor, and now as a director.
I have never met Dev Patel. I don't know if I will ever have the pleasure. I'm so proud of him for making this.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like, also just looking into the problems that they had making this and all the different hurdles that they had in the creation of it, it sounded like just an absolute nightmare. Like everything that could go wrong went wrong with this film, and he still made it, and it is so entertaining. It has all these grand political messages and this like neat talk, like looking at India through this new fabulous lens, but also at the end of the day, it's just such a kick-ass action film. It's so fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. And that's so you touched on something I definitely want to talk about, especially when it comes to you, because you and I both had, I mean, okay, so revealing this fun little fact about you and I. So we went to the same college. That's where we met. We were both in the film program, and we both had a particularly incredible professor who I don't know if I could name online publicly and if he'd be comfortable with that, but you know who I'm talking about. An incredible professor in our film school who often taught us that obstacles in filmmaking are where we truly find the creativity and strengthen our creativity. And this film is such a perfect example of that because, like you said, they went through so many difficulties. Like Dev himself had so many different injuries on set from all of the action sequences. They had times where they like ran out of funding. And, you know, yes, this is a film that had enough of a budget to like make it into an AMC. But at the same time, it still lives in a world of low budget. So there gets to be a point where like you run out of funding and you can't do that action sequence, or you can't, you know, hire as many extras as you need, whatever it is. But, you know, again, to take it back, it's like this film went through, like you said, so many different struggles with production. And yet for it to come out as a film that I don't think you'd really be able to tell the difference. Like I personally, if I didn't know that fact of all the difficulty that they went through, I would have never known.
No, 100%. I feel like there is something where whenever you say like, oh, it was really good for a directorial debut, or, oh, it was really good considering everything, This movie's awesome. It does not need any qualifiers. This movie is really good. And I don't think it is like above criticism. I don't think it's the most perfect thing that I've ever seen in my life, but it is awesome. It's so much fun. I thought like Dev Patel really carries it. I thought his martial arts were phenomenal. He is I just loved it. And I really think it was also, talking about that it was able to get into the AMC. I think that was only because Jordan Peele kind of stepped in. Originally, it was just going to be a Netflix release. And
Okay.
when Monkey Paw Productions got involved, that's when it really started getting like the foundation to get the distribution that it got, and I think the distribution that it deserved. And I really, really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
I think that there were a lot of things that I would be curious to see what they had to compromise on, or what if there was one thing that Dev looks back on and is like, oh, I really wish we could have done it this way for this reason. But I mean, genuinely, I don't think it's a movie that requires any qualifiers when you're talking about its quality. It is a great movie, and you can go in completely blind and still really have a good time.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Especially because just even sort of the cinematic style is so intentionally gritty to reflect the story and, the setting, that it's like there were shots that were shot on like I think an iPhone and GoPros and that kind of thing. Again,
Yeah,
for
I
all
saw
of
that
these
too. Yeah.
production difficulties. But I hate revealing this because I feel like it like knocks me down as a filmmaker. But I cannot tell you which shots were on an iPhone or a GoPro because again, it blends so seamlessly. And a lot of it goes back to obviously the director of photography. The director of photography. I work in film. I know my terms, guys. Like so, the DP knows what he's doing. Obviously, incredibly seasoned. It's the same DP that did Whiplash, actually. So shout out,
Really?
yeah. I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you have a good DP, and they can get away with
Yeah.
like knowing how to seamlessly blend these things in together. And a lot of it starts just with the framing and just with, knowing what you're going for in the first place to be able to work that in when you have a situation where it's like, all right, well, shit, we got to grab a phone and get this done.
Yeah. When you have a performer who is delivering a performance that well, and you have a director of photography who really knows what they're doing, and you have a script that's strong enough, at the end of the day, obviously beautiful cinematography is important and I love it, but it is a facet within this inner working, just this vast machine that creates excellent films. And sometimes something being out of focus or something not being on the best film, like it can convey emotion in a way that is purposeful. So if you don't have the best camera on the planet at your disposal, but you're able to creatively know that and plan for that, it really shouldn't be apparent to the viewer that you didn't have access to that camera. If anything, it should feel like, oh, we didn't need that camera versus we couldn't afford that camera.
Yeah, true. That kind of feeds into, I don't know if I've ever had this conversation with you, but I kind of have a bit of a problem when famous directors respond to the question, what would you tell up and coming young filmmakers, kind of thing. Oftentimes they respond to that question by saying something along the lines of, my advice to any young filmmakers, just pick up a camera and go. Just pick up your phone and go. And yeah, okay. On one hand, to just get experience and to just go and to just create and to learn from your successes and mistakes is incredibly valuable. It's the most valuable thing it's literally experience. However,
but it's also, everyone already knows that. Like, that's not advice.
Yeah, that's not really advice. And also, I think there's a world in which, how do I say this without being super crazy? Dune Part 2 would have never been made on an iPhone. And that's just never have been made on an iPhone. Never in a million years would Dune Part 2 have been made on an iPhone. It's the reason that I say that is just, it's like, you can get incredible films from just picking up a camera and going. Sure, but there's a limit. There is a limit based on the tools that you have available to you. And so, yes, as a young filmmaker, getting that experience and just like learning again from your successes and mistakes is invaluable. However, there's this whole world in which like making any film costs so much money. Making a low budget film costs so much money that it's like it's just it bothers me a little bit when, you know, really well renowned directors will say that kind of thing, because it's like you just released a film that is Oscar worthy. Even if I like poured my heart and soul into the latest iMovie, iPhone low budget film, it's like it is not the same, you know?
There is something very political about the film industry. And I also think there is something every single person I have ever encountered, if I get them to tell me the story of like, how did you get to where they are? Not a single one shares an origin even remotely. Like every single person is like, well, I was here and then I kind of stumbled into this and then I ended up doing this and then my script got into the right hands, or I asked the right question, or I just found myself on a set. Like everyone has their own journey. So I think at the end of the day, it is kind of like the advice is don't give up, but make sure that you can still afford to live and pay your bills. Like don't sacrifice anything that you can't sacrifice, but it is a labor of love, and it's something where everyone learns in very different ways. Some people learn by just watching an unbelievable amount of films. Some people like to write scripts. Some people like to read books and then figure out how those can translate. And I think every single journey is completely valid, but it's really difficult when you're like, well, what advice would you give to young filmmakers? And it's like, step one, be lucky. Step two, work so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That is what it is. It is always a mixture and a perfect balance of hard work and luck. Because you cannot, I don't know, this is super divisive. We're getting so off topic, but I love it. I don't think you can really get super far in the film industry fully on hard work, because at a point you will burn out, you know, because also, again, so much of the film industry is like you are often working jobs that are not necessarily your dream job. You're often working per se as a PA to get experience and to pay bills, but your dream job is not to be a PA forever. Your dream job is to be a screenwriter or whatever it is. And so how do you then balance the hard work of busting your ass every day as a PA versus if you only ever do that, how are you going to get to the point of being a screenwriter or whatever it is? So again, taking it back, it is just a balance of, you know, luck and having the space to make certain things happen, but also the hard work put into it. You can't, it's never fully getting there by either one.
But I think, you know, thinking about, you know, advice for young filmmakers, looking at, to bring it back to Monkey Man, like looking at Dev Patel's journey, he has been successful in the film industry since 2008 with Slumdog Millionaire. That movie had tons of Oscar buzz. Lots of people were talking about it. A lot of people had not been exposed to Indian film before. I don't think, like, it's not technically a Bollywood film, but it was a lot of people's introduction to this kind of different genre. And he waited until 2024 to release his directorial debut, and it almost didn't happen. So I think I think sometimes the lesson is like work hard, but also like timing is really important. Like before you take that big bite, before you take that leap of faith, make sure you really have that foundational knowledge of what you're doing. And I think because originally when I saw that it was like actor, lead actor, writer, and director, Dev Patel, I'm like,
we all had the same thought of like, oh no.
Speaking of experience from MSU, I've worked on one film where that was the case, and it was not my favorite experience of my life. And the product was, I'm going to go ahead and say weak. Like when you have one person wearing so many hats, they need to know what they are doing within the industry. And I really think Dev Patel took his time to really sink his teeth into something like this. And you can tell, like, I think the directing, his performance, the writing, all of it came together in a really, really good way. So it's unfortunate that the advice can be like patience, but just be strategic about when you take those big leaps, and every single project that you do is a lesson. You could see the mysticism of The Green Knight. You could see the vivacious like Slumdog Millionaire. Like every project that Dev Patel had worked on influenced this film in small ways, and it just felt like he was building towards this like his whole life. And it's
Yeah.
really amazing to see him be able to execute this. I'm so excited for the next thing that he's going to make.
It goes back to as well what you were saying about how this film balances the action with the depth of the story. And I think so much of that is like, obviously, clearly Dev Patel had a strong connection to the themes of this story. And also, so the reason we can even bring this to the Movie Theater Butter podcast, which is largely about adapted films, Monkey Man isn't super a directly adapted film. It is vaguely based on and mostly inspired by a Hindu story of Hanuman. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm incredibly unfamiliar with the Hindu religion, so anybody who watches this, please take everything I say with a big grain of salt and fact check me if you want. I would recommend that. But the quick gist of the story of Hanuman, which is also retold in the film, is that Hanuman is a god in the form of a half monkey, half human. As a kid, he flew up to the sun, thinking it was a fruit, and was struck down with a thunderbolt by the king of the gods. As he grew up, he was cursed to forget his own powers, but then later is reminded of them and kind of regains these powers. Notably, later on, he leads an army of monkeys to help the incarnation. Yes, is that? Why am I feel like I'm pronouncing that wrong? Help an incarnation of Vishnu recover his stolen wife. So there's more to the story, of course, and there's side stories and more important characters within this, but that's kind of the super quick spark notes. That being said, it's very clear the inspiration of this story reflected in actual Monkey Man. And I think it's so beautiful because it's like, it's almost like perfectly obvious in a way, how it's like, I don't know how to say this, but you couldn't tell this story if Hanuman was the rich bad guy. You know, clearly it's like the character development of the actual character of Hanuman is so perfectly reflected in this story in modern day specifically. With, again, what we're dealing with geopolitically. I don't know a lot about India and the politics of what is going on in India either. So again, grain of salt, please. Fact check me, please.
Systems of power abusing like a caste system where people are being used for what they are not, people just being taken advantage of, colorism, racism, all that unfortunately familiar.
Especially with the part of the Hanuman story being that, he was cursed to forget his powers, right? And then has to later on rediscover them. That is something I think so many of us can relate to, no matter what your situation is, because like for one reason or another, everybody has like, you are not fully yourself and you are not fully in your own strengths and intelligence, all of that until you are older. And for so many different reasons, we kind of, within ourselves and because of what society is putting onto us, we forget our own powers. We don't think of our full capacity and our full capabilities until we're older, and we can kind of unlearn a lot of these, a lot of this like discrimination.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think a story where someone's power is systematically stripped away from them and then they have to earn back what is rightfully theirs is something that unfortunately a lot of people in this country and many others can really resonate with. And I really think that there are a lot of things that are in this film that would resonate with an Indian audience or an American audience, just especially with the representation of India's third gender, with the like the transgender community coming and being an amazing part of this film. I was not anticipating loving this movie as much as I did.
And it was like that
it.
character and the character and their importance to the story was also like, I think so intentionally kept out of the marketing. I think the marketing was very clearly like, this is Dev Patel's John Wick. If you like John Wick, go see it kind of thing, which is the best way to bring somebody into it. And then again, you fall into all of the depth that this brings and the importance of that character that like a lot of films would intentionally, I think, put in their marketing And then that could kind of ruin, because there's so much like negative connotation with things nowadays and how people feel about gender identity specifically. That I think if you marketed a film that way, it could help and or hurt the film. I think not relying on that as a marketing technique. Do you kind of, I don't know if I'm like phrasing this super well, but
I saw,
like just letting that exist rather than plugging it as like, oh, this is part of it, which it is. But again, I think the importance of how to bring somebody into the story is to be like, it's Dev Patel's John Wick and you're going to like it. And there's so much depth to the story that you will find just because you're here and you're watching it and you're enjoying it and you're in it, rather than like, am I making any kind of sense? I feel like
no,
okay.
Absolutely. I saw there was an interview where it was Dev Patel and Jordan Peele like interviewing each other, and I can't remember which one of them said it, but about this movie they were talking about you're eating your vegetables but you don't realize it. There are so many themes and important things that you can walk away from this movie that it's really thought-provoking, but it's also so much fun. Like, it is such a fun action movie, but like you're really rooting for people who deserve your attention. You're really paying attention to like India's third gender has been, I mean, since British colonialism, they have been swept under the rug. And just so to see them being portrayed in a way where they are actively involved in their own stories, being a hero, helping him out. I mean, I wrote down when they talked about like we were warriors, I said this is Chekhov's Hydra army, and I'm so excited for it. Like they're
That's
coming
so
and they're gonna kick ass. I'm so
film school kids
for it. Yeah, anything that's foreshadowing, no, that's just Chekhov's.
Always
whatever.
So something I do want to talk about too, you kind of mentioned the way that this film can resonate with multiple audiences around the world. Again, I want to talk a little bit about, there is an aspect to this film that I think plays differently with a Western audience versus another audience, because I'm so clocked into what Western cinema is because I live in the West and that's like almost all of what I see. And so one of the things I want to talk about with that is we kind of expect certain beats in a story. And a story like this that is very heavy action, very, unsung hero climbing his own personal ladder and, like growing up, that kind of thing. Especially as it pertains to violence, I think we kind of expect that there's going to be a beat in this film where we realize like, oh, the violence isn't going to help. The violence isn't going to heal you. Like, that's not what you're truly looking for. It's actually a symptom of whatever. And while I do think the morality there is excellent to talk about and to try and implement as much as possible, like you mentioned earlier, for better or for worse, it is not always the case that that can happen. And especially like, we are both incredibly privileged people to live in a very privileged country and a privileged place. And while we can preach pacifism as much as possible, again, it is so very situational. There are people in places in the world that does not get you anywhere. Like it just cannot, you reach a wall. But taking it back to the Western audience of it all, I felt like that was like an expected beat in the story, right? To like notice that like, oh, violence isn't going to solve anything. And we had that quote that I mentioned earlier by our bad guy where he's like, yeah, like your anger is not going to do it, man. And again, it was so perfect because it's like, that's kind of the beat you expect, but that is not the lesson. And that is not the point. And that is not where we're supposed to get to. And I like that it wasn't that like expected, like, peace is going to solve everything. It was like, no, hang on. Here's the fucking moment. You are a bad guy. You are not going to stop no matter what. I need to be the one to stop you. This is the moment right now, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when it comes to action movies, you can kind of anticipate the climax is going to be a fight.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said where like systemically when you're going up against a regime of violence that does not value your life, like I think if Dev Patel's character was from that VIP cast, was from someone who they like these people would recognize as human, okay, maybe that would be a different story. But at the end of the day, if you're dealing with people who do not see you, there was another quote about it that I jotted down where it was talking about like they don't even recognize us as people. They don't.
Mhm.
They can't even if you can't identify someone as a voice worth listening to, it doesn't matter how well you speak or how well that you are articulating yourself. So at the end of the day, it's their fault for not listening. If you stopped being deaf to people's voices, then I wouldn't have to shove a shoe spike through your forehead. But you didn't listen to me, so here we are. And the shoe
Mhm.
spike's going where it's going to go.
And it's going to be shot so well, and it's going to be acted so
We shot
well.
so
Because,
well. Oh my god.
yeah, not only, yes, shot so well. And again, shout out to the director of photography, Sharoni Mier. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I did write it down. Shout out, you did incredible. And also, again, I do want to just like positively note how well acted the action sequences were. Because it's one thing as an actor to memorize and safely execute action sequences. It's a huge choreography. It's a lot of training, a lot of safety meetings. It's one thing to get all of that done. And then it's another thing on top of it to be so genuinely physically and emotionally in the character that you're watching the film and it doesn't look like, oh, what a cool shot action scene. Like you can notice that in the back of your head, but you are watching it and you are so involved in the emotions, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I also think there's something to be said, like when you watch the first film, the first half of the film, and the second half of the film, it's like you're watching two different people. Dev Patel
Yeah.
completely changes his physicality, his confidence, the way that the first time that you see him in the ring, where he's just absolutely getting thrashed. He like gets thrown out of the ring, breaks a table. The second time, it is one back piercing kick to the jaw, and that dude is out. And also his technique. Dev Patel does Taekwondo, which is the same martial art that I did when I was a kid. So his technique is phenomenal. It is a thing of beauty. If you know anything about martial arts, watching this movie is a visual treat. There's like a whole nother level that the average viewer is not going to pick up on. His toes were a little high. Your heel is
I was
supposed to
thinking the
be
same
higher,
thing.
but honestly, like, I'll give you the pass. I really, really enjoyed this. Yeah, um, I just think that there were some things that are depicted in the physicality. This is not a movie that has a lot of there's not a monologue. There's not something that's being thrown at you that is like, oh, let me parse apart like the words of this. It is a visceral, it moves so fast and it does not get caught up in unnecessary dialogue. It is heavy action with a lot of stuff going on in the background, but
Mhm.
it moves. It really, really moves. And seeing his transformation, seeing Kid's transformation from the beginning to the end, it's like, I mean, the minute that Hanuman gets his groove back, it's such a treat to
Chapter
watch.
4, Hanuman gets his groove
Hanuman
back.
gets his groove back.
You know what's funny too? You mentioned the Taekwondo. That was going to be my pop quiz question. So,
Really? Well, I do
spoiler
know that one
alert.
off the dome.
I was
I
going to be
know quite
like,
a lot about
what's
Taekwondo.
black belt? Does Dev Patel? But yeah, that's incredible. Also, I feel like that's something that I knew about you, but it's been so long since we've talked about certain topics that it like went to the back of my mind and it like, the second you mentioned that I was like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." And then I was like, "Wait, no, I did know that." We did talk about that at some
Yeah,
point.
I did live in India for 3 months, and I do have a black belt in Taekwondo. So I felt
Hell
relatively
yeah.
confident when Monkey Man was floated. I was like, oh, I can talk about that one.
I've got the knowledge. I'm going to ace that pop
Yeah, it's
quiz.
in there.
So, another thing I wanted to talk about with this film, and I'm losing my train of thought. So, I'm just gonna, as I'm getting my train of thought back, keep saying filler words. And so, what was I gonna talk about? Brain, don't do this. Now's not the time. I'm looking at the floor and there's nothing in my brain right now. Monkey Man, he did the thing in the. Oh, and we were talking about. Okay, I'm back. So we we're talking about the stuff in the ring, and when they're like when he's doing the initial fighting and kind of just getting his ass totally beat. Um, in that whole beginning part of the film, I was so personally like nitpicky about things. I think because again, you know, actor to director, I was like, I came into it and I'm like, I'm sure this is going to be fun, but like, I just want to nitpick it. I just want to be like, you don't know what you're doing as a director. And so for like the first 15 minutes of the film, I would have this little moment in the back of my mind where I'm like, that shot's actually too long. And like, I don't think it needs to be that long. Like, this music is just not the right vibe. And then I got to a point in that scene where I just like, it was like a just instant snap where I like dropped out of it. And I was like, oh, wait, this is really fun. I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then unrelated, but the iconic shot, my favorite shot of the whole film, when he comes out of the elevator and it's just like red behind him and the red like expands because the elevator doors are opening.
Oh, so
gorgeous.
Good. It's so good.
Beautiful.
What were your thoughts? So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think they overused first person perspective?
Ooh, okay, good question. I don't think so because it doesn't stand out enough to bother me.
I think if they did any more, I would say yes, that they did. But there was a decent amount of it, but there is none that I think that I would remove. You know? Like it was like a pink flag. It wasn't a red flag. I was waiting for it to become a red flag, and they never overused it enough. But I was curious if that was something that you noticed, because there's a bit of first person perspective, but I think it really, I don't know, it makes the fight really visceral when you can feel. I mean, it's like him getting knocked out. It's these very powerful moments when it shifts to it. And there's also one when they're in the staircase where it shifts from first person perspective and it gets thrown off, and then he's in the corner and the fight continues. And I genuinely stood up from the couch and started screaming. I was like, "Oh my God, that was so cool!"
I love when you like have like such a visceral reaction to something like that. Like you have to scream. Incredible.
This movie had me. I watched it alone, and there were multiple times where I was, and I'm a pretty quiet person when I watch a movie. I generally kind of like get in the zone and really want to be in. I was yelling. I was laughing out loud. Like I had a very vocal reaction, which is unusual for me if I'm watching a movie on my own.
Yeah, hell yeah. But we love it, and you know it's good that you can do that, and it's so not on topic, but similarly on topic. There's a lot of films out. There's more and more films nowadays that there is like an audience participation aspect, right? Where you are encouraged and often it's planned to participate in some sort of way. The most notable example recently, I think, is the Taylor Swift Eras Tour that released in theaters, because of course, you know, there's a lot of culture behind that. But it was like, you know, sing the song, stand up, do some of the dance moves, whatever. It was actively encouraged and it was part of the experience. In almost every other film, it is not part of the experience. Do not be on your phone. Do not be like all of us kind of know, right? It's not really the average film going experience. But the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, and then there was something else recently, I don't remember what it was that came out, but that it might have just been like a re-release that they were like intentionally like, oh yeah, we want you to kind of like speak to the screen or like say these lines or whatever it is, certain audience participation. And it was not Rocky Horror, because yes, that's another example. But what I want to say,
the example that you're thinking of, but there was the Alamo Drafthouse did a release of Cats where it was like a don't watch this.
Come with your cat
screening. Like come with it. This movie is not good. Come make fun of it with a bunch of people. So there have been, I think there is kind of like there are some audience participations that's coming out, and you're like, that's a very interesting development. And I think, they're still making money for the movie, but like, interesting.
Do we need to be doing a participatory cat screening? No. Would I attend? Perhaps. I don't know what it is. And maybe I really am just thinking of like the 2 or 3 examples that exist today. But I don't have a thesis statement for this. It's just that like it's interesting that there's more and more of those. It'll be interesting to see how that potentially develops in theaters more with, you know, theatrical releases. Because especially taking it back, obviously movie theaters are still kind of struggling from coronavirus, from the way that streaming has impacted the industry and all of that. Of course, at home, you can do whatever the fuck you want. you can scream at the TV, and it's such a different experience. Whatever way you view a film is such a different experience in a beautiful way. And this segues us over perfectly to Elise. I have a question for you, a question that I ask every guest on every episode of this podcast, starting the first time I asked this question on the podcast. How do you think Monkey Man is best watched?
I have been thinking about this question a lot because both times I watched it alone, relatively late at night, and just gave it, especially the first time, I just gave it my full attention, and I had the best time. I mean, it's a movie that moves so quickly, like kind of like Mad Max, where like it is shot after shot after shot, and every shot there's something to pay attention to. But you know, I don't think this movie would be bad if you watched it with other people, but it's something that just captivates your attention so wholly if you give it the opportunity to do so. That, I mean, really, if it's a movie that you are even remotely interested in, just watch it by yourself. Like, don't wait for the perfect group of friends or the perfect time. Like, just go watch it and then bully all of your friends into coming over and watching it again, because you're gonna want to watch it a second time. But like, truly, I think just sit down and put your phone away, just fully pay attention to it. It's 2 hours. Just really watch it and see what it makes you feel and how you enjoy it. It's pretty violent, but like, you're gonna have a great time.
Warning, definitely very violent.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, I wish I could have seen it on the big screen, honestly. I bet, especially knowing how hard it was to get to where it is, the fact that it had like a silver screen viewing, it feels more special that it had to fight so hard to get that. So I'm kind of bummed that I missed it on the big screen. But I mean, just throw it on. You don't need like a special event. You don't need anything. Just go watch it. You're gonna have a good time. It's a movie that like really carries itself in its tone.
Absolutely.
So Alone, the best way to watch it.
No, well, also it does it does exude like a very intentional main character energy. You are supposed to relate to this character. Like we've talked earlier, there's a huge relatability.
If I watched my mom,
so many
if
people,
that happened, I would go on a very similar murder spree.
Yeah, of course. You would leave the theater and be like, I need to buy this specific type of gun that they use in this movie and in John Wick.
Yeah, let me go make some fireworks.
On like a gross note, I was almost going to make that my pop quiz. I know nothing about firearms, okay? I played a lot of Call of Duty and I forget every single name of the guns. I know like what a sniper is. Yeah, okay. But I was like, for a quick second, I was like, I'm going to ask what kind of gun this was, because blah, blah, because it'll be a cool little fun fact. And of course,
hey baby, you're more than welcome to ask it. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a gun.
Yes, it was.
Small one of those ones, that's like pew pew. It's me putting this on the internet. Bad idea. That's going to be used for something I don't want it to be used for. Anyways,
it is interesting that he did not use a firearm in the final fight.
Yeah,
he made it so much cooler. A gun once.
Yeah,
so much cooler.
Yeah,
so much cooler.
We could even talk about. I fucking love
could you imagine if
in action sequences like impromptu? The elevators are in what? He has like 8 guns in his hands at once.
Could you imagine if like he gets to the final level, he opens up Baba Shakti, he just fucking shoots him and then just goes back down? Like, that'd be such a bad ending.
I would have loved that. It's
guns
giving,
are just not.
No, it's giving the same energy as, oh God, what was that film? It was a martial arts film. Something about, I can't remember the title. Jesse Eisenberg was in it, I believe. I don't know why I'm doing such a strong hand gesture that doesn't relate to what I'm talking about.
In a martial arts film.
It was either him or the other actor that I get confused with Jesse Eisenberg. Anyways, it was a martial arts film. It was very indie level, kind of like, super underground. And what was funny about it, spoiler alert, is that, they're hyping up all the martial arts and the importance of this and the importance of like protecting yourself and safety and being able to fight back. And yet one of the main characters who like has this whole story about like killing someone with just their thumb turns out to be that they actually just shot them, and the small hole is just like a bullet hole kind of thing, and it comes back later. But it's like funny in that way where it's like, okay, you have such a heavy emphasis on the importance of all of this different type of action, all of this martial arts, just to end it off with like pew. Like, Very funny, very funny. But for this film, yeah, I love just the progression of action we get. And also, again, we get so many beautiful, like, impromptu weapons. I love that in film. When it's like, pick
Yeah.
up this silver plate and smash it on this guy's head, and then pick up a pencil and stab it into their throat, stuff like that.
So many impromptu weapons. An
Yeah.
impromptu weapon feast. I mean, the minute he walks into the kitchen, you're like, oh, everything's dangerous. It's a commercial kitchen. And then he uses absolutely everything he can get his
Yeah.
hands on. And it is wild. I mean, yeah, it was I really enjoyed it. I do think, I don't know, did you feel so like there were so many action sequences in this movie that are they move so quick, they're such a visual feat, like the music is going, so much is happening. And then we get to the like penultimate fight with I think Rana was his name, the police officer captain.
Mhm.
And it's just him and Dev and it's much more it feels like it leans in so much more to the drama. I would almost say like compared to the other action films, there's or sequences, they're so memorable and iconic. And you get to this one and it almost loses that. But Dev delivers the performance so well and it's so well done. But I don't know if it was the best way to do it. Like what they did
Yeah.
beautifully, but I don't know if it was the best. I don't know. What did you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that final second to last scene?
Yeah, honestly, so reminding me of it, and you're totally right. It doesn't hit in the same way that sort of
Mm-hmm.
the final boss battle hits. I think now that we're talking about it, I'm reading it a little bit as almost like a shade to that character that like you are not the final boss, even though you are
Mm-hmm.
like sort of the direct person who has caused me all of this anguish and has, set me forth on this path because of what you've done. Like ultimately you are a lesser character versus like the greater
Yeah.
power that I actually have to attack. And I think, I don't know if this was intentional or if this is really the way to read it as well, but it does kind of play into like, there's a quote from Hunger Games that I love and I repeat all the time. And it is, remember who the real enemy is. You get to that point in Catching Fire where Katniss is about to shoot Finnick because they're in the games and that's what you do. But
Mm-hmm.
he reminds her of this, and that is her way of being like, even though technically you right now are my enemy, you are not the
Mm-hmm.
problem creating all of the problems. And I need to remember who that is. With this film, though, it's like there's a lot of enemies, but it did kind of remind me of that, where it's like, yes, this cop guy character was the catalyst for all of this in many ways. At the same time, like just ending him, is a very personal and important moment of this film. But ultimately, this film has a greater message about the systems of power. It's not just the one on one. Otherwise, it would have been, Dev Patel specifically only ever chasing down and attacking the cop guy.
Yeah. I also, to that point, I love that he just gets outfought. Like maybe it's not the most visually stunning scene in the movie, but the message at the end of the day is just he didn't have a bodyguard to hide behind this time. There isn't a gun. It's just him versus Kid, and he just gets outfought. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it. At the end of the day, he just couldn't keep up, and it feels like a much more like maybe visually it isn't as rich, but emotionally, and I think especially with like Dev's performance walking away from that, you just really, really feel it. It really makes you feel something. It wasn't, I don't know, there's so many incredible scenes in this film that
Yeah.
like sometimes you just accidentally set the bar too high for yourself and you're like, well, I peaked.
If you do too
And the
good
rest of the
before
movie
Act
still has to
3,
happen, but like,
yeah.
no, I did really like at the end of the day that he just got beat.
Mhm.
He didn't have anyone else to hide behind. And I also like that like Dev didn't have like crazy weapons or anything. Like it was a very even match and he won because he had something worthy to fight for. Like he was doing it for more than just himself or his greed, like this horrible guy was
Yeah.
doing. And yeah, it I don't know if you can tell, Kim. I really liked this
So,
movie.
Elise, I do have one final question for you before we wrap it
Yes.
up. Did you enjoy this movie? Did you like it?
Yeah, hey, Kim, I think I really liked this movie.
Yeah, good. I couldn't tell the whole time while we were like, yeah. Good, nice.
I will say, like, the rickshaw having a turbo button, the Fast and the Furious of it all, like, it just made me cackle.
Yeah.
Of course it does. Perfect. Why not?
You gotta. There's gotta be
also,
some kind of cool
when you
car
introduce a character
chase.
like Alfonso, of course he's gonna put a turbo button on his rickshaw. Like, yeah,
I want a turbo button on my next vehicle so bad. It'd be so fun. She'd just be like in the middle of the 405 and be like, I'm just gonna blow past these guys. Boop.
Yeah, incredible. Where the stop and go traffic is averaging 15 miles an hour. I'm just gonna quick hit the NOS and
turbo past everyone. Yeah. Incredible. Well, thank you, Elise, for finally being on the podcast. I've wanted to bring you on the podcast for so long, and it just like something beautiful clicked in my mind where I was like, let's do it.
Truly, anytime you want to talk about movies, I am game. This is so much fun.
Hell yeah.
Really good to catch up with you and talk about Monkey Man.
Yeah, you too, man. Now I want to go watch it again. I'm gonna find wherever it is on streaming.
I'm gonna go watch it again after this, honestly.
Hell yeah. And go see Furiosa.
I will. I'm here tonight. I was supposed to do it literally right now. I should be watching Furiosa, but
it's all right. There's always another showing. All right. Well, it sounds like that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Movie Theater Butter, a TillKim Productions podcast. Make sure to follow us where you're listening and on our Instagram page at the Movie Theater Butter podcast. And hey, it couldn't hurt if you gave us a quick 5-star rating on this platform. All right, I'm done. See you next episode.